A double rainbow coruscated into being. Close into the lip of the rimfall were the 7 lesser colours, sparkling and dancing in the spray of the dying seas. But they were pale in comparison to the wider band that floated beyond them, not deigning to share the same spectrum. It was the king colour, of which all lesser colours are merely partial and wishy-washy reflections. It was octarine, the colour of magic. And it was the undisputed pigment of the imagination, alive and glowing and vibrant, because whatever it appeared, it was a sign that mere matter was a servant to the powers of the magical mind. It was enchantment itself. But Rincewind always saw it looked like a sort of greenish purple. Oh no, the lighting changed because I got distracted and had to do this video a lot later. Goes without saying, this video is going to involve spoilers for The Colour of Magic by Terry Pratchett, which at this point is over 30 years old, so not my problem. Anyway, you might remember that me and Anna did an episode of How Not to Play on The Colour of Magic for the Commodore 64. You might also remember that we didn't really get that far in it. In fact, we basically drowned a cat and did nothing else. So, since I kind of wanted to know what would have happened if we hypothetically managed to leave the city, I got the book out and I finished it a couple of days ago now. I just want to point out that my post-it notes are little llamas. Anyway, the main character of the book is Rincewind, a very cowardly wizard who I feel a lot of kinship to because, like me, he is scared of everything and likes money. Because money lets him not die. So Rincewind is apparently like a super powerful wizard, but at the same time he's not a super powerful wizard. And that's interesting because him not being a powerful wizard messes him up. But when people think he's a powerful wizard, at the end of the book, it still messes him up, and that's kind of hilarious. You've got to love Rincewind, even though he's not a perfect character, because he's unlucky, and you sort of feel like he needs a hug. His travelling companion is Twoflower. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be Twoflower there. He's basically from Dejima. Historical context, during the whole period where Japan was like, grr, no one come into the country, Dejima was the only port where foreign traders were allowed. And Twoflower is the first tourist on the Disc. And I'm going to get into the setting of Discworld in a minute. It's fun because it's taken a character you don't see in fantasy and put him right in the middle of fantasy. Normally you'd be seeing the world because you're an adventurer or a mercenary or a sellsword or whatever, but he's just a tourist in a Hawaiian shirt and glasses with a camera. And I love the camera, by the way. It's just a box with a gremlin who paints stuff. It's great. One of the other central characters, though he's only in it for about half the book, is Hrun the Barbarian. And he's basically an XP of Conan the Barbarian. I almost said Conan O'Brien. That is arguably an even funner concept. So he's there to fight and drink and get jiggy. If I ever say that again, someone please slap me really hard. He's a bit of a flat character. He's just sort of there to provide some muscle, which in the end isn't really needed. I'm not good at book reviews. I'm mostly just doing this because I thought it would be a bit funny. So I'm not sure if I should mention them as a character, but they are on the front of the book, and they are the luggage, who you might notice is a luggage chest with legs. Now, depending on whether he's drawn by Josh Kirby or the guy who started drawing the covers from Interesting Times onwards, not Interesting Times, the time travel one, the one that's Les Mis. What's it called? Thief of Time? Is it Thief of Time? Nightwatch? I think it's Nightwatch. Anna, if I'm wrong, please forgive me. Why did I want to know Nightwatch? Yes! Depending on whether the luggage is drawn by Kirby or the dude who started from Nightwatch, depends on whether the luggage has cutesy little human feet or is basically a giant spider monster. Something I found out literally today is that the luggage was based on an item from a D&D game that Terry Pratchett played. And that sort of blends seamlessly into the next thing. I was going to say I was going to talk about the Discworld setting, and that's what I'm going to do now. So full disclosure, I'm not very familiar with Discworld, but I have read some of the later books, specifically the first 3 Tiffany Aching books, We Free Men, Hatful of Sky, Wintersmith, and Anna has read me Small Gods, Guards, and she's actually reading Men at Arms to me right now, and she's sending them as MP3 files because she's adorable. And I know I've read a couple of others, but I cannot for the life of me remember what they are. But it's very clear that the setting is very different from what it becomes. Colour of Magic is less a fantasy story set in Discworld that happens to be very funny, more a parody of fantasy in general, but picking out specific tropes. Like very early on when they're establishing the setting, there's a lot of mentions of how spells take up specific parts of your brain, which is a reference to Jack Vance and Dungeons & Dragons, and I found most of them really funny. As anyone who has run into the problems of spell slots in Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder will attest to. I don't actually know if Pathfinder has spell slots, thinking about it. I've never played a magic character in Pathfinder. Where was I? Can you tell this is my first time trying anything relating a book review? Ellie did it. I thought it looked cool. I wanted to be like Ellie. Anyway, they also have like a fairly nice H.P. Lovecraft-esque monster called Bel-Shamharoth, keeper of the 8 of the 7+1 sides. And Bel-Shamharoth is interesting because they managed to describe them as genuinely kind of frightening in what is otherwise kind of a farcical little comedy. There's the description of Bel-Shamharoth, which I'm going to try and find it now so I can read it. He was not evil, for even evil has a certain vitality. Bel-Shamharoth was the flip side of the coin, of which good and evil made up only one side. And I just like that out of nowhere this monster that could legitimately be from a cosmic horror story just appeared. I thought that was really cool. Another thing that's different from a lot of other Discworld books is it's split into chapters. The first chapter sort of introduces the setting that this is a flat planet on the back of a giant turtle floating through space, and here is Ankh-Morpork. And then the plot kicks off in the second one because, spoiler alert, so they go through a forest and that's where they meet Hrun, and that's the one with Bel-Shamharoth, this terrifying eldritch abomination that just pops up. The third part is probably my favourite, mostly because I'm a slut for action and dragons and sword fights, and it has all of those. And 2 of those things are upside down. But the other thing is because it touches on what I really like about Terry Pratchett's work. So in We Free Men and Only You Can Save Mankind, which were the first 2 Pratchett books I read, the thing I loved about them was, and as a 10-year-old, this sort of blew my mind that this was a thing. I thought this was really clever, and I still do over a decade on. You have this nature of perception and how it affects stuff. In Only You Can Save Mankind, it's how Johnny's perception of this alien spaceship changes the moment another human steps on board, and their perceptions of the alien spaceship begin to warp it around them, and it takes up like a combination of both. So in the third chapter, spoilers, there are dragons that come from your imagination. While the people trained to do this can do it and can create like transparent bronze terrifying dragons, Two Flower does it accidentally because he doesn't even know it's possible. He just imagines a dragon and there it is. I thought it was nice. I like the trope of being able to achieve stuff by not even knowing it's possible. And then that again has more parodies to typical fantasy. They've got this dragon rider woman who is wearing like a chainmail bikini and thigh-high boots. But most of the men are similarly described as wearing like leather pants and have chainmail covering everything except their chests and stuff. And they make a note of how ridiculous this looks. It's not done for sexiness, it's just there because it's kind of bizarre. The last chapter is Edge of the World, and That's the one I've got the most to say on, and admittedly that's because it's the one I finished recently. Starts off after a time lapse, and when it first starts, it's... The description I used when I was telling it to a friend was Steven Universe-ish. It's very pastel-y and very sweet and very surreal. It almost reads like a fever dream. There's an old man made of water. There's a rainbow around the edge of the world. And I've not read any of the other Discworld books that go into, like, the geography of the edge of the world. So it had this sort of dreamlike quality, which I really loved, and I couldn't put it down for, like, the first half of that chapter, because it was just really beautiful. And then at the end, they go back there, and on the edge of the world, there are birds eating tiny little fish. And it's just a really nice imagery. There's nice imagery throughout the whole book, but that's the stuff that stuck with me. And then the other half of the final chapter is just out of this world. Pun unintended. Bizarre and over the top. But it still keeps in with that kind of surreal nature of it. The city of Krull want to launch a spaceship out into the air. But of course it's fantasy, so they've not got rocket fuel. So they've got this long ramp that goes all the way down and then suddenly just comes up again. I don't know, the imagery in the last chapter really sticks with me, and I don't know why. And the thing with the last chapter that makes it clear, admittedly, I've not read a lot of Discworld. I don't know if this is standing out. This is just I quite like that it's going into the geography of the Discworld instead of the setting. Don't get me wrong, I love the stuff that goes into the setting. I love the stuff that explores, hey, this is what these little cultures in this world, and these are what these people do, and all of that. But I liked that it sort of explored the physicality of this disc on the back of elephants on the back of a turtle, and how that moves through space. Part of the reason they're doing this mission is to determine the sex of the giant turtle, because if it meets another giant turtle, what if they mate? That might be bad. But the other thing is, as I've said, I've read mostly later Discworld books where the setting has changed. One such example would be Death. The first time I read Death in a Discworld novel would have been in Hatful of Sky, where he's very sweet and very nice and very polite. And he only has cameos in the other Discworld books I've read. I've not actually read a book that's got Death as the main character yet. I'm getting to it, don't worry. But in this, Death is a bit of a dick. Like, he's deliberately chasing down Rincewind. It's actually kind of terrifying. There's still elements of that in later books. In both this book and Small Gods, he sort of pretends to just be a random guy to someone and then takes them. In Small Gods, it's almost like he's just there to be with them, to just see them through. And in Colour of Magic, it is a little more malicious. He hands this guy the thing he's going to use to kill himself with. That was the main thing. I'm sure if I keep reading Discworld, which I'm going to because Anna has got me hooked now, I'm sure that I'll learn other stuff as the setting changes. I don't know, because I've had people say Colour of Magic isn't as good as the later ones. That doesn't necessarily mean something's bad. We can all agree Paul is nowhere near as good as Shaun of the Dead or Hot Fuzz, but it's still great. So yeah, that was me rambling about the Colour of Magic. Thank you for enduring this. Hey, thanks for watching. This episode, as I mentioned, was inspired by an episode of How Not to Play that me and Anna did. If you want to watch that, click here. If you want to watch some other stuff I've done, then click below it. Or don't click anything. You're a free person. You get to decide your own fate, dude.